My husband, Marcellus, was preparing dinner when he received a message from a coworker. "Boss, I miss you." After a moment of hesitation, I replied for him. "Come over. My wife isn't home today." A short while later, the doorbell rang. My husband's face went pale as a ghost, drained of every drop of blood. In the spacious kitchen of our luxury condo in Buckhead, the sweet and savory aroma of slow-cooked oxtails permeated everything. It was the scent of home warmth, of that happy family life everyone dreams of. Or at least, that was what I had firmly believed until that very instant. Marcellus was standing in front of the stove, stirring the pot that was simmering over low heat. He was wearing the navy blue apron I gave him for our wedding anniversary, while humming an old R&B love song. Seen from the back, Marcellus was the perfect image of a successful black man, a consummate professional who also knew how to take care of his family. He always told me that a man making money out in the world is an obligation, but cooking at home for his wife is a privilege. I was sitting at the kitchen island flipping through an architectural digest, but my mind was elsewhere. The warm yellow light illuminated the marble countertop where Marcellus's brand new iPhone lay in silence. Its black screen was like a bottomless abyss, hiding secrets that not even I, his wife, the person closest to him, had ever suspected. Marcellus turned around with a radiant smile on his handsome face. The fine lines starting to appear around his eyes only added to his charm. He asked me to taste the gravy to see if the seasoning was right, then went back to focusing on his complex blend of spices. It was right at that moment. The phone screen on the counter suddenly lit up, soundless, but with a cold blue flash indicating a WhatsApp message. My eyes instinctively darted toward it. The phrase that appeared on the lock screen was short, but it was enough to bring the peaceful world I had worked so hard to build crashing down in a single blow. Sender: Kaylani, intern. Content. Boss, I miss you. Just 4 words. I miss you. My heart didn't hurt anymore. That pain had died a week earlier when I held the bank statement in my hands. The only thing left now was deep contempt and a meticulously devised plan. Kaylani. I knew that name. She was the new intern who had joined Marcellus's department a few months ago. I remember Marcellus telling me about her once, praising her for being quick, polite, and eager to learn. What I didn't imagine was that her eagerness to learn would extend to her boss's husband. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing lungs. The rationality of a 30-something black woman who had overcome countless hurdles to get to where she was didn't allow me to scream or break things. If I made a scene, Marcellus would invent some excuse, saying it was just a joke from an immature girl. I needed something more. I needed irrefutable proof, evidence they couldn't deny. Marcellus kept chopping vegetables. The rhythmic sound of the knife against the cutting board drowned out the wild beating of my heart. Quietly, I picked up the phone. The passcode was our wedding anniversary. What irony. He used the most important day of our lives as a shield for his dirty secrets. I typed in the 6 familiar digits. The screen unlocked, showing the WhatsApp conversation with the unread message at the top. Without opening it to read, I quickly typed a reply. My fingers, cold and precise, glided over the virtual keyboard. Come over. My wife isn't home today. I hit send. I watched the blue double check appear, and a faint smile drew across my lips. I took a screenshot of that brief exchange, sent it to my own phone, and deleted any trace from Marcellus's device. I wanted him to be completely oblivious when the show started. I placed the smartphone back exactly where it was, at the exact same angle. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the repressed rage boiling in the deepest part of my soul. I looked at Marcellus's back. He was still the same man, with the same devoted appearance. But now, in my eyes, everything was repulsive hypocrisy. He was playing the role of the perfect husband, but his mind was likely flying off to his young, pretty mistress. If he wanted to act in this farce so badly, I would make sure to direct the tragic final scene myself. I fixed my hair, composed my expression, and tried to return to my usual state of calm. The storm inside me remained hidden behind a serene gaze, waiting for the chance to level everything in its path. This was going to be a very long night. Marcellus served the steaming oxtails in a large serving dish and placed it in the center of the table. The intense aroma of allspice, thyme, and beef spread through the dining room. With a cloth, he meticulously wiped away even the smallest splash on the rim of the plate. Yesterday, that delicacy would have moved me to the point of hugging him. Today, however, looking at that stew was like looking at poison coated in sugar. He served me a plate full of white rice and, picking the most appetizing piece of meat, placed it on top. With a warm, deep voice, he said, "Eat while it's hot, baby. I cooked the meat until it falls off the bone." He even bragged about going to 3 different markets to find the best cuts just to take care of me the way I deserved. I accepted the plate from my husband's hands, making a superhuman effort to keep them from shaking. I brought a piece of meat to my mouth and chewed slowly. It was incredibly tender, and the gravy had just the right kick I liked. But as I swallowed, I felt a bitter, nauseating taste, as if I were chewing ashes. I had to drink a large gulp of water to keep from gagging. I looked at the man sitting across from me. Marcellus ate with an appetite, offering me sides now and then, and telling me funny stories from work. He talked about a new project, how the CEO had congratulated him, and his plans for a promotion this year. But there wasn't a single mention of Kailani's name or that young intern. I wondered how a person could lead a double life with such mastery, being able to receive an "I miss you" from his mistress, and moments later play the role of the exemplary husband who adores his wife. Maybe during our 6 years of marriage, he had repeated that performance so many times that even I couldn't distinguish what was real and what was fake anymore. I remembered our difficult beginnings when we got married. We started with nothing in a small studio apartment on the outskirts of the city. Marcellus took my hand and swore he would work tirelessly so I would never lack anything to get us a decent home. And he kept his promise. This luxury condo, all these comforts, were the testimony of our joint effort, but it seems that as material abundance grew, people's hearts began to change too. Satiety gave way to base desires, and the devoted wife who once shared a simple sandwich with him now seemed flavorless compared to the fresh young women outside. Feigning being full, I put down my silverware. I said I was a little tired and didn't have much appetite. Marcellus immediately adopted a look of concern. He got up, walked over to me, and put his hand on my forehead to check if I had a fever. His hand was warm, but as soon as it touched my skin, I felt a chill that soaked me to the bone. I turned my head slightly to dodge his hypocritical touch, excusing myself to get a glass of water. I glanced sideways at the clock on the wall. The short hand was approaching 7, and the long one 12. Time was passing with mocking slowness. From her office or her student apartment, it would take between 30 and 45 minutes to get here. I wasn't going to let this golden opportunity slip by. My wife isn't home today. That spell was more powerful than any invitation. When I returned to the table, Marcellus was clearing the plates. He told me to go to the living room and rest, that he would handle the cleanup. The image of my husband rolling up his sleeves to wash dishes, which I used to brag about to my girlfriends, now seemed like just another scene in his disgusting theater. I sat on the sofa and picked up the TV remote, but I didn't turn it on. My gaze was fixed on the front door, and my ears were tuned to any sound from the hallway. A fierce battle was waging in my mind. Part of me wished she wouldn't come, that it had all been a bad joke so I could keep fooling myself. But the other half, the colder and crueler side, yearned for the doorbell to ring as soon as possible. I wanted this pain to come out into the light in all its rawness, because an abscess only heals when it bursts, even if the scar it leaves is forever. Every minute passed with infinite heaviness. The sound of water in the kitchen ceased. Marcellus came out drying his hands with a towel and asked if I wanted some fruit for dessert. I shook my head and sketched a faint smile. It was surely a crooked, forced smile, but Marcellus didn't notice. He was too sure of his own perfection. Or maybe he had never cared enough about my mood to notice anything strange in my eyes. The clock struck exactly 8:00 p.m. The apartment was so silent you could hear the ticking of the second hand. Marcellus sat on the sofa opposite me and started reading the news on his phone with an expression of total tranquility. He probably thought it would be another peaceful evening with his wife, or maybe he was already planning what message he would send his mistress as soon as I fell asleep. He didn't have the slightest clue that the storm was about to break right at his doorstep. Ding-dong. The sound of the doorbell broke the silence. It wasn't a loud sound, but in that space, it resonated like the gunshot announcing the start of a war. Marcellus lifted his head, startled. In his eyes, there was surprise mixed with a pinch of confusion. He looked at the clock, then the door, and muttered, "Who could that be at this hour?" Then he looked at me as if I had the answer. I remained motionless on the sofa, maintaining an almost icy composure. "Stay seated," I told him. "I'll get it." My voice was soft but firm, leaving him no room to move. I stood up and walked slowly toward the door. Every step on the hardwood floor sounded heavy, like the hammer blows driving the final nails into a coffin. My heart was pounding hard, not from fear, but with the strange excitement of a hunter about to trap their prey. I took a deep breath, fixed my posture, and put my hand on the knob. I turned the lock and opened the heavy wooden door. In front of me stood a young black woman of petite build, well made up, but with a face that hadn't yet lost its childish air. She was wearing a tight dress that highlighted her young figure, and in her hands she held a small box with a carefully packaged individual cupcake. The instant she saw me, the flirtatious smile drawing on her lips vanished, giving way to an expression of pure panic. Her eyes went wide as saucers, her pupils contracted in fear, and her face, previously flushed, turned as pale as paper. She froze, and her trembling hands almost dropped the cake box. She expected Marcellus to answer the door. She had surely imagined the scene, jumping into his arms, telling him in a honeyed voice how much she had missed him. But the raw reality that hit her head-on was the image of me, the lady of the house, his lawful wife, blocking the entrance with a gaze sharp as a knife. I said nothing immediately. I simply observed her terrified expression in silence. My silence made the atmosphere turn even more suffocating. Kaylani stepped back half a pace, moving her lips as if she wanted to say something, but her throat seemed blocked, as if someone were strangling her. She looked toward the interior of the condo and then back at me, with the look of a thief caught red-handed. I heard Marcellus's steps behind me. "Who is it, babe? Why are you taking so long?" he asked. His voice plunged Kaylani into even greater confusion. She looked around as if seeking an escape route, but I wasn't going to let my prey get away that easily. I smiled. It was probably a smile more terrifying than weeping. And then I spoke. My voice was loud and clear enough for both the person inside and the one outside to hear, loaded with cold authority. "Hello, Kaylani. Are you here to see my husband?" My question was like a bucket of ice water for Kaylani, and simultaneously a shock for Marcellus, who was approaching. I saw Kaylani shudder. She realized she had fallen into a trap, but there was no turning back now. The door was open. The show had officially begun. Kaylani was shrinking like a little bird that had accidentally fallen into an eagle's nest. She squeezed the cake box so hard her knuckles turned white. Stammering, she barely managed to articulate a few words to justify her untimely appearance at those hours. She said she had heard Marcellus was sick, and since she was passing by the neighborhood, she decided to bring him a cupcake, hoping he'd recover soon so he could keep teaching her, the intern. A lie so clumsy it was pathetic. I knew perfectly well that Marcellus wasn't sick, and that this gated community was so tucked away it was impossible to pass by unless you came on purpose. But I didn't correct her. The fun of the cat and mouse game consists of not killing the mouse immediately, but playing with it until it exhausts itself from pure terror. Maintaining a faint smile, I fixed my gaze on her face, which was changing color by the moment. Seeing that Kaylani was trying to turn around to flee, I said with a voice cold as ice, If you take a single step out of this hallway, tomorrow the entire company and your parents back down in the country will receive the photos and messages of you two. Come inside, let's talk calmly, and I'll let you keep a shred of dignity." Kaylani stood rooted to the spot. Trembling, she followed me reluctantly inside. I told her that since she was here, she could take the chance to see the house, that the vibe was very cozy. I emphasized that I wanted to formally introduce her to my husband. I elongated the word husband on purpose, as if stamping a seal of ownership on the man frozen behind me. Marcellus had already reached the living room. Seeing me enter with Kaylani, his face broke down even more than hers. His eyes were bulging and his mouth hung open, but he was incapable of saying anything. The phone he held in his hand fell onto the sofa. He looked alternately at Kaylani and me, oscillating violently between panic and confusion. He couldn't understand why Kaylani was there, or why I was receiving her so calmly. I led Kaylani to the center of the living room and sat her on the armchair, facing the large sofa where Marcellus usually sat. Kaylani sat on the edge with her back straight and knees together, not daring to look up. I turned to Marcellus and gestured for him to sit next to me. Like a soulless automaton, Marcellus walked stumbling to the sofa. Even though the AC was set to 75 degrees, drops of sweat beaded on his forehead. He sat as far away from me as possible, as if I were a bomb about to go off. I started with the introductions. Pointing to Kaylani, I told Marcellus that she was that good intern he talked about so much, who had come to visit him in the middle of the night with a cake and everything upon finding out her boss was sick. Then I introduced Marcellus to Kaylani, saying he was the most exemplary husband in the world, a man who had never disappointed me. Each of my praises was like a needle sticking into Marcellus's skin. I saw him shrink. I noticed Kaylani shooting a pleading look at Marcellus. She expected a word from him, an excuse, a reassuring gesture to save her from this situation, but the only thing she received was cowardly evasion. Marcellus kept his head down, fiddling with the hem of his shirt, not daring to utter a word. His cowardice did nothing but increase my contempt, and probably even Kaylani started to feel a pang of disappointment. The man who seemed so admirable and authoritative in the office had turned, upon being discovered in his infidelity, into a pathetic little man who feared his wife more than a lion. I stood up, saying I was going to offer our guest something to drink. I asked Kaylani what she fancied. Orange juice, water, or some hot tea? With a barely audible voice, she replied that water would be fine. I smiled and headed to the kitchen. The living room was plunged into a tomb-like silence. I knew as soon as I disappeared, those two would exchange panicked looks, but they wouldn't dare speak for fear I'd hear them. And that was exactly what I wanted, to let the terror eat away at their minds, little by little. In the kitchen, I made noise on purpose, taking out glasses and plates so they knew I was still close, listening to everything.